Can a hidden technical error, undetected for weeks, ruin an entire Formula One season? What happens when your car is not what you thought, and you discover it in the middle of the fight for the title? Throughout the weekend in Austin, Texas, the atmosphere in the McLaren paddock was one of trust. After a dominant start to the season and with both drivers well positioned in the general classification, the team arrived at the Circuit of the Americas not only with high expectations, but with an implicit pressure to confirm its status as the rival to beat. Andrea Stella, firm in her statements prior to the Grand Prix, had stressed that the car was responding well and that consistency would be key to maintaining the advantage. Everything seemed aligned for the Papaya team to consolidate its leadership. But the reality of the track soon contradicted that optimism. From the initial sessions, Oscar Piastri reported strange sensations in the behavior of the car. Although the initial data seemed within expectations, something did not add up. On Saturday during the sprint race, the disaster was consummated. Just as the lights went out, a sequence of unexpected decisions and situations triggered the collapse. Piastri, starting from second position, opted for a strategic maneuver that he had rehearsed in the simulator and in training, an aggressive cutback in turn 1. But the track, chaotic due to the dense traffic and the aggressiveness of the drivers in the middle of the grid, did not leave him room to execute the movement with precision. Nico Hülkenberg, fighting side by side with Fernando Alonso, crossed the Australian's ideal path and touched him on the rear tire. The blow lifted Piastri's car, which was momentarily out of control. The following was inevitable. In full rebound, it violently impacted Lando Norris's McLaren, who was coming from the inside, completely oblivious to the approaching outcome. The start of the sprint in Austin encapsulated in just a few seconds everything that is unpredictable that a Formula One race can be. One curve, an overly ambitious maneuver, a millimeter miscalculation, and the weekend could go down the drain. The first corner of the Circuit of the Americas is known for its great gradient, its generous width, and paradoxically, for being one of the most incident-prone points of the season. In this context of ordered chaos, Oscar Piastri was in a privileged position. He started from second place with clean air ahead and the confidence of a car that, at least on paper, had to be up to the task to win. However, from the moment the lights went out, something didn't work as expected. Lando Norris, starting from pole, was more aggressive in the first meters. Piastri, instead of forcing the duel with his teammate, chose to open up slightly and prepare the counterattack at the corner exit, a classic maneuver known as cutback, designed to sacrifice the apex at the entrance in order to have better traction at the exit and recover the position. Until then, everything made sense. But what he could not foresee was the emergence of Nico Hülkenberg's Sauber, which was coming along a completely different line, fighting to the death with Fernando Alonso in a desperate attempt to gain positions before the funnel. The impact was direct and devastating. The front suspensions of both McLarens were instantly compromised. Piastri's car, still wobbling, ended up ruining its rear end by hitting the curb of the curve, while Norris's car got stuck with broken steering. In less than 5 seconds, McLaren had lost all of its competitive advantage for the weekend. 2 cars outside, 2 drivers without the possibility of defending their points, and an entire team forced to watch the rest of the sprint from the garage. The consequences were immediate, but not only in sports. Inside the paddock, reactions were divided. Zak Brown, true to his style, looked for culprits from the first minute. He stated bluntly that Hülkenberg had no right to be where he was, and that it was amateur driving that eliminated his 2 drivers. But it took a few hours and a review of the replays for Brown to soften his stance, admitting that the incident had been more complex than it seemed. Andrea Stella, for her part, opted for a more analytical stance. Although his speech was restrained in front of the cameras, internally it was clear that his frustration ran deep. He spoke of disappointment, lack of caution among experienced drivers, and the loss of a valuable opportunity to score key points. This accident, which in another context would have been one more in the long list of Turn 1 incidents in Austin, was actually the spark that lit a deeper fire. A fire fueled by errors, technical omissions, and decisions that, until then, had remained hidden under the surface of an apparently perfect team. The first signals emerged in the telemetry system. Engineers noted that even before the impact, Piastri's car was showing abnormal readings in key parameters of aerodynamic balance and braking stability. The most worrying thing was a persistent variation in the ride height, a difference barely perceptible to the naked eye, but enough to drastically modify the car's behavior when cornering. This height, regulated millimeters by the passive active suspension system, was not operating within optimal values. The centerpiece of this ruling was the legality plate, a component of the car's base that ensures that the minimum height limits established by the FIA are not violated. If this plate wears more than allowed, it not only exposes the team to possible disqualification, but also critically alters the way in which the flat bottom interacts with the ground, directly affecting the ground effect, that invisible force that keeps the car glued to the asphalt. In Piastri's case, the plate had shown irregular wear on its lateral ends, a sign that the car was tilted asymmetrically, affecting the distribution of downforce between axles. This explains why, throughout the last few races, the Australian was constantly struggling with a car that felt nervous in traction and lacked confidence when entering corners. While Lando Norris could confidently push his car to the limit, Piastri was forced to drive with a defensive mentality, compensating with his driving for what the car was not giving him mechanically. But there was something else. Engineers discovered that the original calibration of the suspension system of car number 81 had been established with a tolerance that was incompatible with the actual wear observed on the track. This suggests one of two things. Either there was a misreading during the initial setup of the car, or a critical review of accumulated wear over several races was omitted. In both cases, the responsibility fell to the technical department. And for Andrea Stella, this was unacceptable. In short, what was discovered in Austin was much more than a simple technical failure. It was an uncomfortable mirror that forced the team to look inside themselves and recognize that even in a very high-performance environment, the invisible can be deadly if not detected in time. The tension in the McLaren pit after the United States Grand Prix was not simply a consequence of the accident between its two drivers. What really fractured the internal calm was the revelation that Oscar Piastri had competed for several weekends with a technically compromised car, without anyone in the team detecting it, or worse still, without communicating clearly. These types of situations in an environment as meticulous and sensitive as that of a leading Formula One team not only compromise results, they compromise relationships, leadership, and internal credibility. On a sporting level, the calendar offers no respite. After the debacle in Austin, the championship enters a critical phase, with 3 Grands Prix in 4 weeks, including tracks such as Mexico and Interlagos, which historically severely punish cars with stability and set up problems such as those presented by Oscar Piastri's car. Downforce, temperature sensitivity, and graining management will be determining factors in each of these circuits. If McLaren fails to resolve the internal imbalance between its two cars, it runs the risk of seeing Max Verstappen and Red Bull capitalize on the slightest opportunity to snatch the lead. Another key factor will be rebuilding Oscar Piastri's confidence in the team. Although the Australian has not made controversial statements, the tension is evident, and those closest to him have begun to exert pressure. It is expected that in the coming days he will have a private conversation with Andrea Stella and Zak Brown to define the technical and sporting direction he wants to follow. A large part of this dialogue will depend on whether Piastri feels truly integrated into the project or if an underground division begins to emerge within the McLaren garage. In parallel, rivals have already begun to adjust their strategy. Red Bull, with Verstappen in full attack mode, has improved its performance on technical circuits and has shown a great ability to manage tires, which will be key in the following rounds. Ferrari, although still fickle, has demonstrated a qualitative leap with the SF25, and Hamilton is already beginning to show clear signs of adapting to the new environment. Mercedes, for its part, with an aggressive George Russell and an Antonelli who continues to score points, represents a silent threat that can become a surprise if McLaren does not contain the internal bleeding. But not everything is negative. McLaren still has the most complete car on the grid. Its aerodynamic package, its top speed, the efficiency of its energy management, and the quality of its two drivers make it the only team capable of fighting on all fronts without having to depend on external conditions. Will Joseph's work on the Norris car and Tom Stallard's experience with Piastri ensure that technical solutions are within reach? What remains to be resolved is whether the team structure can sustain the pressure of defending a championship when conditions are no longer ideal. Do you think McLaren was totally transparent with Oscar Piastri? Do you think these types of failures can occur by accident in a team that operates with millimeter precision? Or is there something deeper, perhaps an internal structure that unconsciously prioritizes one driver over the other? What do you think of Andrea Stella and Zak Brown's reaction? Were they adequate or late? Are they in a simple adjustment phase, or was this the beginning of a progressive decline compared to the rise of Red Bull and Ferrari? Also, tell me if you as a fan would continue to trust the Papaya team after what happened, or if you are leaning towards other teams that have shown more stable and consistent management in these first Grands Prix. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.